Hello my friends, I hope you're having a lovely day, and for today's video we're going to talk about some Bloodstained Ritual of the Night impressions from the Switch version. That is the only version I have played, and according to my Switch Parental Controls app, I've played it for a bit over 3 hours, so I put in a good amount of time. I've seen the impressions online of the game so far from other people, so I don't know how much time those people put into it, but certainly there are people out there who have played it more and have different impressions. But when it comes to online commentary about games, sometimes I worry that comments are just so voiced in anger and frustration that things are exacerbated and maybe a little bit overdone. So I wanted to share what I'm going to try to present as a level-headed approach to how I feel the game is. I certainly have some things to complain about like other people too, so let's get into it. First things first, the footage you're seeing is recorded after I recorded the audio, so I'm not talking and playing at the same time. Alright, first up I want to mention real quickly frame rate issues. On the Switch, the game is supposed to be at 30 frames per second, and as far as my 3 hours has taken me, I haven't really seen any issues with it. There's been a couple stutters here and there, but nothing bad by any means. And again, I hear things potentially get worse the later you get in the game, so maybe it will become more of an issue with frame rate and stutters and stuff like that. But so far, nothing that has caused me any problems. There was one stutter that froze the game for maybe a second, and outside of that, that was it. So I don't mind 30 frames per second at all. I know people are very hyped about 60 frames per second on every game whenever it comes out, but hopefully you knew that wasn't going to be the case with the Switch version. So far, so good in that respect. Nothing that's really taken me out of the experience. People have been reporting crashes, and I have a crash to report as well. I have one crash so far, and it happened maybe close to an hour in the game. There are some bookcases around the castle and other surrounding landscapes, and when you go up to them you can read things that'll teach you new maneuvers or give you story details, stuff like that. And I went to go read one of the bookcases and the game crashed. Now obviously there's no autosave here, so depending on when something like that happens, you could lose a lot of progress. So you're going to want to make sure you save all the time, just in case something like that pops up. But thankfully for me, it happened only a few rooms away from where I had just saved. So I fired it back up and got right back to where I was like 5 minutes later. Frustrating, certainly. Nothing bad as far as me losing progress, but something like that, I want to say it should never happen. That obviously cannot be the case, but to be within the first hour of the game and already have a crash, it certainly made me worried. So I've always been paranoid in these types of games about saving and saving often, and now even more so I am. And every time I go up to a bookcase, I'm like, oh god, is this going to be the one? If I see a bookcase, sometimes I'll check the map and see, is there a save room around here? And I'll go save before I read it. And it shouldn't be like that. I shouldn't have to do that. So obviously this is an issue. Something I wasn't expecting, but it certainly seems like it's present, is input lag. Now, I've played plenty of games that have input lag, or games that make you basically sit out an animation for a character before you get to the action that you want to do. Stuff like a flashback or out of this world / another world, whichever you call it. Those games prioritize animation of the character over input. So that's not input lag, that's literally the character taking a while to go through an animation before, or after you hit the button. And with Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, I keep wanting to say Symphony of the Night, there certainly seems to be input lag that wasn't intended to be there, so not things that are playing out animations. Now, Miriam can get some weapons that take a while to swing, like overhead swings because they're big and heavy, or just the way she approaches an attack with things can take longer. But this is not the instance, or that's not the case here about animation. It certainly seems like there's input lag, and you can just do a basic press the button to jump, and you can see when she jumps there's a slight bit of lag there. It was enough for me to notice in the first area of the game. It wasn't something that took me out of the experience, but it's certainly frustrating. I feel like I'm more forgiving of that stuff, but I can recognize it shouldn't be there. And my understanding is it's not there or not as prevalent on other platforms. So We do know the developers are working on bug fixes, and they said they've prioritized the Switch version because they saw the complaints. So hopefully something like this will be fixed up quickly, but input lag is major. Obviously, I would say it's the biggest issue here because if you feel like your button presses aren't matching up with the action on screen, you're going to get screwed over. You're going to have to you time everything you do just slightly differently. And like I said, I've played so many games that are like that as far as how animations work. That's just how I'm treating this one. So I'm playing it fine, but that's not an excuse or not a reason for me to say there's no issue, because there is an issue. And if you're trying to do inputs very quickly, like attack, dodge backwards, jump and attack at the same time, then dodge again and slide kick, some of those are going to get lost in your button presses and in the input lag. It's just going to miss those things. They're not going to happen. And when I battled the first boss in the game, that's when things really came into play. I had to adjust how I played to get around those issues. Now, it's not like a whole second of input lag, but it is noticeable. So if you're not used to that kind of thing, or you're not willing to put up with it, and again, I'm not saying you should be willing to. You shouldn't be willing to. It should not be there. But if that's a major problem for you, which I completely understand, the Switch version might not be the one you want to check out. In the visuals department, the game for me has always looked to be a really mixed bag. There are times when I saw trailers and screens for Bloodstained on other platforms, and I was like, that looks nice. And other times where I saw it and I was like, oh, that doesn't look good at all. And that's the case with the Switch. And this is an area that doesn't bother me at all. Like, I don't care, you know, it looks fine. I'm not, sometimes there are some gorgeous screens and sometimes there's some stuff that looks really wonky, but that's not anything I'm knocking the game down for, because all that stuff is really subjective as far as, does this look pretty? Does this look nice? Now, I can say without a doubt things have been downgraded, obviously. The resolution is lesser. There's special effects that have been taking out things like, you know, rain splashing around on environments that you're walking through and things like that. So there are visual downgrades and things that have been removed visually, and that annoys some people, and that's completely fine. It's just not something that bothers me, but I do recognize that it's there. I can't say if I like the look of the game or not personally, because I honestly don't know, because I've had too many moments where just things look great or things don't look great, and it has more so, it certainly has to do with elements that are removed visually because of the Switch port, but also it has things to do with like just artistic presentation. There's just some design choices where I'm like, ugh, that doesn't look good to me. That's not pleasing to me. But again, it's all subjective. Lastly, I want to mention the game's cheese factor, wonky factor. I don't know what to call it. There's a certain charm that Igarashi's games have, or his Castlevania games had. And I feel a lot of that charm came from his attention to detail, or his team's attention to detail with the sprite and pixel animations. And this is, Bloodstained is a polygonal game, and it does not have that same charm for me. And it leads to a sort of, like I was saying, cheesiness or wonkiness to the experience. It's hard to describe. It gives off the vibe of like a PS2 era title, not when it comes to actually traversing through the castle and attacking enemies and exploring. That's completely fine. I dig all that, really enjoy that. But when it comes to the story elements and how it's written, and the voice acting and the lines that the voice actors are saying, the voice actors I think are actually pretty good. I would say better than I expected. But their lines are not so hot, and the way cutscenes are directed is very, it's very wonky. It feels like an early polygonal game, not early PS1, but PS2 or Xbox something, or not even, yeah, I guess PS2, GameCube, Xbox, around that generation, where things were still being felt out and camera movements were very rigid, and the way cameras were set in scenes was a little off, and I don't know, some people might find that stuff charming, and I find it humorous and also disappointing at the same time, but I'm not playing this game or any Castlevania game for storyline stuff. I'm playing it because I love exploring a big environment and seeing what's next, so I'm getting that here. But yeah, there's definitely an element of cheese to the whole situation, especially when it comes to enemy movements and enemy death screams. Or enemy noises in general. And to tell you the truth, the noises I find charming because it's something that's been a part of Castlevania for a long time now. The enemies just have weird noises when they die or weird things that they say when they're attacking, and that continues here. There's moments that are sticking out in my mind right now. I'm playing them back, and that's fine, but yeah, the story and the presentation overall is just very, it feels very dated, and it doesn't take me out of the experience. It's just like, oh, really? Couldn't do any better than this? All that said, I am still really enjoying the game. I'm still really having a lot of fun. As I've said, I am more forgiving of certain issues, but I need to present them to you guys factually, so you have the facts minus just visuals, how I think the game looks overall in general, not the aspects that were removed. But yeah, I am enjoying the game. I'm getting a little nervous because I'm hearing the further into the game you get, the rougher things are, and the frame rate really takes a hit. So we'll see what happens there. And again, I grew up in an era where NES games would run incredibly slow, and it was just part of how things worked. So I feel like I'm more forgiving of that nowadays, and I can put up with it. But that doesn't mean it should be there, and it doesn't mean it's right, and it doesn't mean it shouldn't be fixed. So we'll see how bad it gets later on. If it gets bad enough to annoy me, then you can be assured that it's extra bad. So I'll certainly give another update on this as I'm going through it, most likely on the podcast or something. I'll let you guys know. But that's my impressions of the game so far. I hope you found them interesting, entertaining, and informative. If you have any questions about the game that I didn't address, hit me up in the comments of this video, and I will keep an eye on them and answer whatever I can. So thank you very much for watching, liking, subscribing, and commenting. It's very much appreciated, and I'll be back tomorrow with something. So until then, have a lovely day and a lovely evening, and I'll see you in a few short hours.